Today I want to go over some of the concepts in Chapter 11 about variance. We're going to take what we learned about budgets and the differences that we see and learn how those differences can be broken up to find out where these differences are really coming from. So first let's go through some equations. Your book gives you a kind of complex way to look at this. I'm going to give you some shortcuts showing you what we learned from the book and kind of breaking that down to hopefully save you some time. So the first one we're going to look at is our total labor variance. Our total labor variance is our actual minus our standard. We're going to start using some abbreviations to kind of give you a way to look at this and hopefully start speeding up the process. So when we're talking about our labor variance, our actual is actual hours times actual rate. When we're looking at our standard is standard hours times standard rate. And again, this is for your total labor variance. Now let's look at how we're going to break that down. We're going to break this down into two components, labor price variance and labor quantity variance. And it stems from this total labor variance. I'm going to show you how that works. We take our actual hours and our actual rate, and we're going to compare that just like we did in this total to the standard hours and standard rate. But what we record in our books are our actual hours at our standard rate. So this is where the total comes from. So we take that total labor variance and we're going to break it down to two different pieces. Our price variance and our quantity variance. So to give you some shortcuts and look at some ways that we can start remembering all of these equations and what to use, our labor price variance is really focusing on price, or what rate we're paying our employees. And that's this first piece here. As you can see, there's a common factor, and that's our actual hours. And we're going to multiply that by the difference in our actual rate minus our standard rate. And that's going to equal your labor price variance. One way to remember that is we're looking for price, and labor, our price is what we pay, so we're comparing our rates and timesing that by our actual hours. The second component of our total labor variance is our labor quantity variance. Here we're focused on quantity. So if I go back up to this chart, I can see there's a common factor of standard rates. So I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to take my standard rate and I'm going to compare it to the difference in quantity. When we're talking about labor, our quantity is hours. So I take my actual hours and I subtract my standard hours. And that will equal my labor quantity variance. Let's move on to our material variance. Again, if I look at that total variance, total material variance, it's going to take a look at our actual minus our standard. That's your equation for that, where your actual is your actual quantity times your actual price minus your standard quantity times your standard price. That's your total material variance. But again, we can use that little chart to break this down. What your book shows you, we're comparing our actual quantity and actual price. We're going to compare that to our standard quantity at standard price. And in the middle, what we actually record in our books is our actual quantity at our standard prices. And this is how we break apart that total material variance into our price variance versus our quantity variance. Now, to give you some shortcuts, we're going to give you those smaller equations to look at. The first one, for your material price variance, again, we're focusing on price. So here I look to my equation, I find that common factor, and that's your actual quantity. I'm going to pull that out and compare my prices. Then I'll look at that material quantity variance. Again, focusing on the quantity, I find that common factor, I pull it out, and I'm going to compare my quantities, actual quantity minus my standard quantity. And our final variance is our overhead variance. Our overhead variance is just simply our actual minus our standard. Here, our standard is what we're going to be applying, or our applied difference. To find our applied, that's going to equal your standard hours times your rate. They're going to give you that rate. So the overhead is a simpler. We should be able to do that easily. So let's start there. Here's an example. It gives you, they report 23,000 actual direct labor hours. It incurred $110,000. Remember, incurred is actual. So they just gave you what your actual figure is. So to find that overhead variance, I'm going to find that actual amount, start there. Now I have to find my applied amount. It tells me my standard hours allowed for work done is $21,500 and the standard rate is $5. So my applied amount is going to be that $21,500 times the $5, or let me do a little math here, $107,500. So I'm going to put that in here, find that difference. The difference is going to be $2,500, and then our job is to figure out, is that favorable or unfavorable? Now, I should have, my standard is $107,500. What I actually paid is $110,000. So I paid more than I should have. Therefore, this would be unfavorable.